This week on the Woven Energy Podcast.
If you think of shamanism as having a structure, then Chalicity is the foundation. Chalicity is a state of being. It's a mode that you can put yourself into. The words that I tend to use in English for Bat are discipline, strength, steadfastness, and paragality. You can practice the same thing, being up high, looking out over an expanse below you, a valley. Don't lose the focus on what it is we're doing here. Meditation is far from the be-all and end-all of shamanism. I remember the comedian George Carlin once said, he says, I recently became a sun worshipper. I can see the sun. It kind of helps with the credibility. And I feel like that about the whole of nature.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode 7 of the Woven Energy Podcast with me, Joseph, and Damon. Once again, bringing you shamanism from the ground up. So, how do I become a shaman? Where do I start? What do I do? I'm serious about shamanism, but I'm lost. I've read loads, listened to loads, and I'm just confused. Well, if you're not careful, you can read a good number of books on shamanism out there. And after the big build-up, when it comes to the practical shamanic technique section, you are told to listen to the drum and imagine falling down a big hole. And that's it, as if it's that easy. The fact is, shamanism is not easy. It takes hard work and, above all, discipline. If you remember back to episode 1, I believe Damon described learning shamanism as like a military boot camp. If it was easy, then there wouldn't be so much misunderstanding and misinformation out there. If it was easy, then countless analogous texts, symbolism, and ancient methods of trying to describe this practice wouldn't exist. The big lesson is, if you start down this path, you have to stay on course. You have to be disciplined and practice and fight through the many, many distractions that take place in a shaman's world within even a few weeks of starting practice. If you don't, you run the risk of veering off the path, and you can easily end up sat in a cave up a mountain contemplating your navel for 20 years, or getting caught up in the, quite frankly, amazing worlds that you can create in your own mind, or getting into astral projection and other crazy stuff like that. Basically, imagination will take over, which is not real shamanism. So this episode is going to be awesome if you are prepared to start right, be disciplined, and treat shamanism the way you would any other lifelong passion and skill you would want to develop. Damon is the real deal and has been through it all. This episode, which I'm so excited to bring to you, brings years of experience and direct knowledge to you in a way which I hope gives you some tangible and a practical place to start your journey into shamanism. So this is it. Where to start? How to start? This is the big subject, and one that will quite probably make its way into an online course at some point with loads of examples, videos, and resources. So do watch this space. But in the meantime, Damon, we have said a few times that Chalicity is the first step, and I remember you went into this subject briefly towards the end of episode 1, and I've mentioned it a few times since, but it's always good to repeat things and get different angles on them, especially when it's something so important. So let's start right from the beginning. What is Chalicity? What is Chalicity?
Chalicity is the foundation, the bedrock of shamanism. In some sense, Chalicity is very close to animism. That's animism if you see it as something that you are, a state of being. Obviously, if you see animism as a set of beliefs, remember we talked about the difference between exotericism and esotericism. As Westerners brought up in exoteric society, it's always a temptation for us to start trying to categorize what other people in the world do in terms of what we are. And one of these is, I've seen animism described as the belief that there are spirits in rocks, and there are spirits in the sky, and there are spirits in trees and rivers. But real animism, which is to a certain extent a synonym for Chalicity, is not like that at all. Animist societies don't go around thinking that they are animist societies. It's the way that they are. And they don't go around with a heavy focus on belief in the same way that we do, belief and faith. So Chalicity, in one sense, is a state of being. It's a way of being in the world. And that way of being is an important foundation of shamanism. If you think about shamanism as a set of techniques which are there to derive knowledge from nature, knowledge or understanding from nature, then Chalicity is the state of being in which those techniques can be most effective, can bring real understanding, real knowledge. And, I'm going to repeat again, but people may get sick of hearing it as we've gone through these podcasts.
The important stuff needs repeating over and over and over again.
But the key point is understanding in shamanism does not mean understanding in your mind alone. It doesn't mean you've analyzed it and you've come to some sort of theory or conclusion, or you've categorized it. Understanding in shamanism is about the mind, the body, and the spirit all acting together as one entity. Therefore, shamanistic understanding is holistic, experiential understanding. You've understood things through your spirit, through your body, and through your mind, all acting as one entity. Now, how do you get those things acting as one entity? That is what Chalicity is about. Chalicity has a number of components. I think, as we said, we discussed briefly in a previous
episode 1, I think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
episode 1. Yeah.
So, for instance, I presented the idea of the Bagtamstesal, the capacious container. A container.
So, just to be clear, the Bagtamstesal is the name for Chalicity in Mongol. Is that correct?
It's one of many names. Yeah, and we've discussed this as well.
Yeah.
What's quite interesting, but what you were saying in the introduction about, one of the things that I was very, very interested in shamanism since I first encountered it, really. And I guess at that time, this was before the internet thing came along. Actually, there wasn't a great deal of information available to me. We had Eliade's amazing book. But other than that, there was very, very little. But the way I'd like to describe this in terms of how to understand not just Chalicity, but the whole of shamanism. If you imagine that you have an electronic device, and there are 3 batteries that have to go into that device. Those batteries representing figuratively the top line, the midline, and the base line. And you have 3 batteries ready to go into that device. And instead of putting 1 battery in each slot, you try to jam all 3 batteries into a single slot representing the baseline. This is typically how we as civilized human beings approach learning anything. And that really doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work in terms of shamanism. So what I would encourage you to do when you approach any part of shamanism, Chalicity being the foundation, is try to get your batteries put in equally. The internet in particular, but also the wealth of books and information that we have available to us, tend to make us drag us onto that baseline, drag us down into the roots of the tree. And in doing so, we're effectively jamming all our batteries into a single slot. And that isn't going to make the shamanism device work. It's just not if you do that. So what I'm saying is, through your practice of shamanism, through your practice of Chalicity, which is like the first stage of shamanism, you need to involve all of those aspects, preferably equally, your spirit, your body, your physicality, and your mind to a certain extent. But what I would say is that if you're like me, you're a member of a civilized, settled society, you're not going to need any encouragement whatsoever to involve your mind in this. So don't even try. You remember Fan Quan's painting and the relative sizes of the 3 realms in that. Don't even bother trying to involve your mind, because you will do that. And here we are doing this on a podcast.
We could think of Chalicity as rebalancing ourselves, in a kind of
one of the reasons why I picked out that word Chalicity.
Yeah, let's be clear. Chalicity is a word that you've come up with yourself.
Yeah, it just means a bit like a chalice, just in the same way that Bagtamstesab means a bit like a container, a bit like a capacious container, and there are many, many other words for this kind of concept. But one of the reasons I picked that one out, this concept of the chalice in the Arthurian legends, the Holy Grail. In the legend, the Knights of the Round Table, there are different characters, Sir Lancelot be a classic, or King Arthur. They all have very strong characters. But then there's this guy who actually achieved the Grail, Sir Galahad. And he's a bit different from the other knights. And there's lots of different versions of the legend, but in the legend in general, he's a bit different from the other knights. It's quite hard to put your finger on exactly what his character is. So why among all the knights was he the one who achieved the Grail? Well, there's a million different explanations you could give for that, but I'm kind of inventing my own explanation in a way to try to explain Chalicity. Galahad achieved the Grail through becoming the Grail. The reason they use this phrase many hundreds of years ago, the Grail wasn't something that you found. It's not like a physical cup you go and, well, it was to some people to exoterosis, but that idea of the Grail comes from an earlier animistic intuition in the European tradition. Achieving the Grail, becoming like a cup, becoming like a Grail, being open, being empty, and allowing nature to fill you, to me, that's one of the reasons why it's quite hard to put your finger on Galahad's character, because he was completely empty. He was the Grail. That's why they say he achieved the Grail very often, rather than he found the Grail, if you like. So, Arthurian legend is like all legends of settled sort of civilized type of peoples. It just has hints of something shamanistic, something animistic from our ancient forebears. Obviously, societies like Mongol society, Siberian society, and as we've said, some of the folk religion within China and Japan and these types of countries, obviously they're in some ways much closer to that, because they didn't have this great exoteric break. Well, China did. China had lots of different breaks, but their culture was preserved continuously, whereas ours was created more recently on the whole. So Chalicity is a state of being. It's a place or a mode that you can put yourself into. Anybody can definitely put themselves into a state of Chalicity, because this is in our genes. This kept us alive when we weren't civilized. This kept us alive when we were out in the wild, when there were dangerous animals around, when we weren't particularly strong. The Chalicity is what kept us alive. So take it from me, you can do it. But achieving it, because it's like a innate thing. It's a genetic thing. Achieving Chalicity is not about, as we've said, taking something on so much as getting rid of things. You put yourself into that state by shutting down your miasma, by sweeping away the dust, by emptying yourself. And there are various things that you can do, which we'll go through.
Is there something that somebody could relate to? But I'm just thinking maybe when you are what they call in the zone in a sports game, and all of a sudden everything just works. And would that be something to do with Chalicity? Yes.
All people who excel in physical disciplines achieve a state of Chalicity at some level. They have to. There is no choice.
Mm-hmm. So a musician as well, who is completely engrossed in his piece of music,
thinking at all,
not thinking
about
at
what
all.
They're doing. Exactly. That is it. It's not necessarily the whole of Chalicity. As we said, there are three major parts of Chalicity: Bat, Torshaltine, and Guchach. Those people, they tend to exhibit Guchach to a very great extent within a very, very narrow range, within the range of their particular discipline. The thing that occurred to me when you said that, Jane Torval and Christopher Dean doing the Bolero at the Sarajevo Olympics, you could see just how much practice those people had done. Well, you could and you couldn't. What you saw was the Guchach. It looks effortless. It looks like there's no effort at all. Obviously, there's a huge amount of disciplined work goes into that effortlessness. But it was that's a great example. If any of the younger people listening to this haven't seen that, Torval and Dean, the Bolero Sarajevo Olympics is worth looking up. So there are a number of exercises that can be done, that I've done over the years to help me with my Chalicity. As I've also said on these podcasts, Chalicity isn't something you just learn, now I know Chalicity and now I'm on to the next thing. Chalicity is not like that at all. Chalicity is a matter of degree. You have to work at over a long period of time.
Yeah, I really like that. Chalicity is something you work on throughout your whole life, continuously adding to it and solidifying that foundation. Before we get into a few exercises, I just want to go back a little bit and talk about the analogy that you were talking about with the batteries and the 3 slots. Now, it's pretty easy to understand what you mean by the battery in the baseline slot, because, I mean, we kind of already have that. We've done a full episode on that. That's episode 4 about our baseline bias and how, as a civilized species, we're very logical and rational, and we have a bias towards that. The battery in the midline as well, it's easy enough to imagine what that means, because when we get into the animal spirit dance and engage our physicality, that'll become very apparent. But what do you mean by putting a battery in the spirit slot, in the top line? The word spirit can get very, it can conjure up all sorts of different ideas. So what do you mean by putting a battery in the top line in the spirit slot?
By trusting in your nature. What I mean by that is, we tend to think as human beings that we are driven by our minds, as civilized human beings, that we're driven by our minds, that we have to think about things in order to do things. We talked about walking from A to B, and when I first started out in shamanism, I was kind of questioning whether that was even achievable without thinking, and of course it is. The nature of human beings, we talk about nature and nurture. Nature being, in scientific terms, it's our genetic inheritance, but it's also our place within nature. It's not just our genetic inheritance, but it's a context or the shape, the pattern that makes within the natural world. That is our inheritance, and we are able, if we wish, to lean back on that, to rest on it like it's a prop, to a much greater extent than we actually do when we're in our miasma mode. When we have a miasmatic way of being. So what I mean by that is that there's a certain reluctance within human beings to just empty themselves. I mean, one of the things is values. Some people have values. I have values. Ethical values, moral value, all these kind of values, and they sort of define us to a certain extent. But and we see that as a positive thing. Somebody who has strong values, that we tend to respect them very often. But different people, there are different people in the world with different values, and two different people with two different sets of values. If they hold those values strongly, we'll possibly respect those people. There are also people who have historically been respected because of their very strong values, and they turned out to be dreadful, dreadful people for humankind. So that you can be very sincerely bad. That's possible, and people that's the name that had occurred to me as well. But people, for instance, that particular person, a lot of people looked up to that person because a lot of people go through life, I think, like you've said on another podcast, a lot of people go through life like they are, they're not too sure. And for instance, sometimes when there's an earthquake, a lot of people will look outside their doors and see what everybody else is doing. And if everybody else is running up the street screaming, then they'll run out into the street and run up the street screaming as well. If they look out the door and everybody else goes back indoors, they may think, oh, well, there's not too much of a problem. They go back indoors themselves. The point is that they're looking for some leadership because of our miasma makes us somewhat uncertain. We're culturally conditioned to be somewhat uncertain. This has been, again, we talked about things that make social elites, things that are conditioned into us that become part of ourselves that support historically have supported the interests of social elites. Those things that they tend to introduce an instability into how we feel. We're always worried about what other people think of us, or we show deference to people in positions of power, this type of thing. We're never quite sure where we are. We look to others for and then along comes somebody who is totally and completely certain of what they think. They're strong values. They're clear about everything. They have a crystal clear answer to everything that's asked of them. There is no wavering, no uncertainty in it at all. And to a lot of people, that can be a very attractive thing. Sometimes we use this word as civilized humans, oh, that person has charisma. So, and we get attracted to that. But the issue there is that there's no reliability there. What we're actually attracted to is some potential solution being proposed to the instability that we feel in our lives that's been conditioned into us. But what I'd like to present is a completely different picture to that. A picture where you don't have to worry about values or anything of that nature. You don't have to think about any of that social stuff. All you have to do is lean back and lie against nature, to rely on the fact that nature will come through. If you are empty, nature will come through you. So in some way, it's like faith or belief. But what I'm saying is this is faith or belief in something real. I can see a tree. I can feel a tree. I can hug a tree, as some people do, some people want to do. I can see the mountains. I can swim in the sea. I can't just see it. I can swim in it. This is the sort of thing that I personally feel, if I was going to believe in anything, I don't like exotericism, but if I was going to believe in anything, then that's what I believe in. I believe that if you like, nature is my teacher, and I have faith, if you like, in those solid things. I remember the comedian George Carlin once said, he says, I recently became a sun worshipper. He says, I can see the sun. It kind of helps with the credibility,
Yeah.
And I feel like that about the whole of nature. So, and to me, this is being an animist, not a shamanist. So if you like, that what I mean by putting the battery in the spirit slot is lean back against nature, let nature fill you, and trust in the fact that nature has evolved you, created you, whichever term you want to use, in such a way that is going to enliven you, that's going to lead you in a good direction. That's what I mean by filling the spirit slot. Cool.
Okay, so we've talked about Chalicity, and we could call it the 3 pillars of Chalicity. So we can break Chalicity up into 3 pillars or 3 components. In Mongol, the first one's called Bat. And in English, I know you've got a term for this called paragality as well. Yeah. So, should we talk about the 3 pillars of Chalicity a bit and see if we can put them into a context?
Bat, Toshaltine, and Guchach are the three components. I'm not so sure about pillars, because pillars suggest it's more like Chalicity itself. Chalicity is a pillar.
Yeah.
Chalicity is a pillar in the structure that is shamanism.
Mate, I just thought it sounded cool.
Yeah, it did sound cool, yeah. But Chalicity itself is definitely a pillar.
Yeah.
If you think of shamanism as having a structure, then Chalicity is the foundation. It's that base pillar. And we talked about it being a bit like a pagoda at one point in time. So the first of these, Bat, I've used the word Paragalti, but in different contexts, I will use different words. So the words that I tend to use in English for Bat are discipline, strength, steadfastness, and Paragalti. And what Bat is really about is achieving Chalicity. The state has a coherence. It's not something that's disparate. The state of Chalicity has a coherence, and Bat maintains that coherence. So it probably, so the reason I use all those different words is because Bat doesn't mean any one of those words. They're kind of what I call flavor words. They're hinting words. Yeah. So I think Bat is an easy enough word. It sounds like cricket bat, bat, or baseball bat.
And in Mongolian shamanism, would Bat mean what it literally means in Mongol, if that makes sense? And we in English have to use our flavor words to try and get a flavor of it.
Of course, Bat means what it literally means in Mongol, because they're speaking in Mongol. Yeah, but the question is, what does that mean in English? That's a different matter. Yeah, but I think you could change the question a different way and say, would Bat, the meaning of Bat to a Mongolian shaman be the same as the meaning of Bat to a young cosmopolitan Mongol living in Ulaanbaatar? Absolutely not. Because the young cosmopolitan Mongol living today in Ulaanbaatar will have a lot of influence, a lot of miasma that we collectively, the Westerners, have heaped upon them through movies and all sorts of stuff, Yeah. So one of the phrases, one of the terms that really helped me with Bat was something that's called Buraj Sig Hurt Harate. Unfortunately, that's a bit of a mouthful and not that easy to remember. But it means, if you imagine you're an eagle, a little bit of spirit animals here. You imagine you're an eagle and you're out hunting. You're quite high up in the sky, and you need to find something to eat. Now, what you're trying to pick up on is movement on the ground. If you focus in, eagles, everybody's probably aware eagles have amazing vision. If you focus in on a particular point on the ground, the chances of a marmot or something else, a rabbit or whatever, running across that point on the ground are virtually nil. So eagles instead use an expanded awareness. They range over huge distances and they have a very expansive awareness. But just because it's expansive doesn't mean it's nebulous. It's not disciplined. It's not. It's not what I would use to like I don't know, a bit wet or woolly. It's nothing like that. It's a very sharp, extended awareness. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's very, very disciplined. If something comes into that very extended awareness, it will be picked up on. It may be the next meal, for the eagle's young. So, Bat, in one sense, has to do with how we use our senses. The eagle cannot possibly, eagles have better eyes than we do. They cannot possibly process all of that information that's coming into its eyes on the baseline. It just can't possibly do that. It needs the baseline, the midline, and the top line all acting as one to deal with that. It takes the information, what I call raw, from nature, and through its spirit, it detects changes in the energy, changes in the spirit of the situation. It's effectively part of. It's made, we talked about being like a tea bag. It's made itself part of an expansive horizon, a huge expansive horizon. And it's not separate from that horizon. It's part of it. And it feels, this is the weave of energy. You remember the shape of all shapes as they move together as one being. It feels in its spirit the movements within that huge tapestry of nature. And it knows when there is prey. It doesn't know on the baseline. It knows with the top line, the midline, and the baseline, the leaves, the trunk, and the roots of the tree, all acting together as one. So this phrase, although it's a bit of a mouthful, Bured Shighurt Harate, when you're studying Chalicity, it's always important that you're in that kind of a mode. So one of the things I think you mentioned, practicing your shamanism out looking over a lake. That's a really useful exercise for practicing Bat. I do it down by the sea quite a lot. What I tend to try to do is find a place to stand where I can't see any land. All I can see is water. It's okay if you can see land at a distance on the horizon or something like that, if it's a lake or whatever. Yeah. But I can't see any land close up to me. I also, we've talked about this before, I also want there to be no one around if that's achievable. And I will practice my Chalicity there. And one of the things I will do is I will take the spirit of Buret, the spirit of the eagle, and try, remember we said not try too hard, otherwise you'll drag yourself down on the baseline. Try in a lightweight way to emulate this Bureg Shighurt Harate, the ability of the eagle to sense the whole tapestry and allow the movements in the water, the changes in the energy, the changes in the spirit of the environment, allow those movements to come into me completely unfiltered. That is, I don't focus in on any particular wave or any particular thing that's happening out there on the water. I allow that information to come into me, into my eyes, into my spirit, into my being. Very often, in doing this, I'll adopt a posture with my palms upwards or my palms open. That tends to help you. It's like, remember we talked about the little metal representations of the spirit animals?
Yeah. On your costume, yeah?
Oh, yeah. They represent spirit animals and you kind of identify with them. So this posture is the same thing. Of course, you can do Chalicity. You can do it standing on your head if you want. You can do it in any position. But adopting postures like this with your hands, palms upwards, your hands possibly spread wide. There are various different postures that I use. These postures obviously come from spirit dance. From my spirit dance that I use in order to embody Chalicity. But anybody can just stand with their feet slightly apart with their hands spread wide and their palms upwards. Looking out towards the horizon with the eyes unfocused. Allow the eyes to relax and they'll generally unfocus. And if you want, in that state, once you get used to it, I'm not going to say what will happen if you do that for an extended period of time. You keep practicing it. But all I would say is take it from me, very interesting things will happen. Another thing that we've talked about before the AMSCA, once you get used to it, once you get good at that, you can also use that for observing your breathing in a lightweight kind of way and how that affects your spirit and how the waves affect your spirit. But this is a great exercise for practicing Bat, the Bat component of Chalicity.
Okay, so we stood by a lake, we stood by the sea, or we stood anywhere in nature, preferably away from human civilization. My fear is maybe people could go there, they could open their palms and everything, and then they're like, okay, what now? So
yeah, but that's
is
thinking.
Exactly. So what I'm getting at,
you feel yourself do that, you when I say okay, what now? That means I have now dragged myself down onto the baseline, which is in our nature. So what now is? I got a clear answer to that. Get yourself back off the baseline.
Yeah. And so what we're talking about is clearing the mind. We're talking about not thinking. We're talking about a way of shutting down the thoughts, correct?
Correct. But with a disciplined view. Remember the Bured Shighurt Harate. Mm-hmm. you want to embody that. Let me give you a little bit more detail on that. That two animal spirits. Here's your introduction to animal spirits. Two animal spirits, Burad and Hatzog. Burad, they're both predatory birds. Burad is a wide-ranging predatory bird. It has to simultaneously pinpoint prey species, prey animals, at the same time as sensing the entire weave of nature over a huge area. Some Burad in Mongolia, for instance, they range over huge distances, every day, huge distances. And they fly quite high, so they can see an enormous swathe of ground. So this other bird, Hatzog, doesn't do that. This bird hunts under the forest canopy. It spots prey. It generally attacks from a perching position in a tree, and it spots prey moving under the forest canopy. Again, in the same kind of way, picking up on information unfiltered, but a lot of sound involved in this. Something rustling through the leaves, something of that nature. But when it attacks, when it you can call it attack. When it goes to get its food, that's probably how the Hatzog sees it. It just dives down into all these branches, these thickets and branches. It hunts in very, very dense wood, and it goes at very, very high speed, and it's pinpointed the prey, say a rabbit or some bird or something of that nature. It's pinpointed it, but at the same time, it's flying at enormously high speed through densely netted vegetation and branches and leaves and this sort of stuff. And it moves very, very quickly. It morphs the shape of its body. This is the midline coming into, and it can punch through tiny little holes. It's a fairly sizable bird. It can punch through tiny little holes by morphing its body. And the key point is that it has to know all that stuff's there, or it's going to break its neck in 2 seconds.
I think I've seen a similar video to this on YouTube. I think it's BBC. It's a goshawk flying through the trees.
The Hatzog,
absolutely amazing.
The Hatzog is the Mongolian equivalent of the goshawk.
I'll put that video on the show notes, actually.
Sure, cool. So the point I'm making is neither bird is, although they hunt in such completely different ways, neither bird is safe letting go of the tapestry. The Hatzog is not safe letting go of the great tapestry. It needs a discipline, if you like, a bat, to keep a hold of that tapestry, even though it has this focus. If it's chasing a very fast other bird through the branches, it needs to be able to turn with that bird. Obviously its prey species are evolved to be also very agile under the forest canopy. And it needs to keep a total focus on that bird, but it cannot let go of the weave, of the woven energy, of the tapestry of nature, because the instant it does that, it will break its neck on a branch. So, But in a different way, the eagle out in the open, it doesn't run that danger, but what it does, it cannot let go of the tapestry because it will miss something if it focuses in on a particular patch of ground. Now so you can see that Burad and Hatzog, they're both embodying bat. They're both embodying this link to the environment, but they're not doing it in a passive kind of limp-wristed kind of way. It's a discipline. It's steely. It's keen, like a cutting edge, but it's expansive and it's open at the same time. And as civilized people, we tend to find these sort of concepts or these sort of things difficult to do because we're quite good when we focus in on something. We focus in on something, then we can give our focused attention to something. But having that same focused discipline when your input is expansive and unfocused, that's part of what bat is about, Paragalti. It's not all of what bat's about, but it's part of what bat's about.
Well, this kind of leads me on to meditation a little bit, because I'm thinking the exercise you've just talked about, being in front of the lake, would it be good for somebody before they tried this to have at least a grounding in meditative technique, being able to shut down thoughts?
Yeah.
Or is this an exercise in itself, in and of itself?
No, the purpose is simply to learn how to get yourself into a state of Chalicity. There's no other purpose than that. And there are lots and lots of exercises for this. If you have experience in non-imaginative meditation, where you start shutting down your thoughts, and you're probably going to be quite good at this quite quickly. Certainly in terms of this component, but there are other things here. Another great way this is opportunistic, but it's another great way to practice BAT, is when we're walking through the drive, rain or snow, when it's really driving, it's cold, you're getting wet, it's in your face. Yeah. It always seems to be that whichever way you've got to walk, that's the way the rain's coming from. Yeah. And as civilized human beings, we tend not to like this, but through my practice of shamanism over the years, my attitude to that seems to have totally changed. So now when the rain is driving in my face, or the snow is driving in my face, I treat it as it's an exercise. It's a great time to practice BAT. And I walk through the rain with my head up, or into the snow with my head up, feeling nothing, feeling empty. I mean, don't feeling nothing from in me. I mean, plenty from outside, but nothing from in me. And I'm in a way, it's kind of a physical way of challenging the assumption that driving rain or snow in your face is a bad thing. Actually, these days, I quite like it. It's why does that have to be bad?
It's nature, isn't it? It's just taking nature as it comes.
And it's actually pretty wonderful when you do that in a state of Chalicity. You walk into the I'm talking about real driving rain, driving snow. It coats you kind of thing. The snow, it's great. It's really really good. It feels amazing. And why do we seem to think that it's a bad thing? These days, I mean, I was totally the other way when I started training shamanism. I probably pull my coat around me or pull my hood down or something like that. So this wonderful thing, why on earth wouldn't I want to take this, with the attitude of Bure Chigharate, I just go into it and embrace it. It's wonderful, and it's there's a great place to practice BAT. So you can see that BAT, it gets interpreted as being tough, being strong. Somebody would say, somebody else, do that without a t-shirt on, and then you're getting into the aragyo that we talked about before. But the point that I'm making is, who says that's bad? What's so bad about it? That's the point I'm making. This shows you our kind of social conditioning. Now, obviously, if the temperature is so low that you're going to have frostbite in 2 seconds, that's a different matter altogether. Yeah. But we're not talking about that. But what we're talking about is something that people are socially conditioned to believe is unpleasant, that's actually wonderful. It's not just not unpleasant. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing,
As civilized people, though, we are a little bit nurtured, are we? Ever since we're born, we don't really have to face nature. And so it's interesting when we get to a stage in life when we can go outside and try and embrace nature for what it is. It's almost shedding the opinions, shedding those things that we take for granted, and having a more direct connection to nature.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's interesting because the more that I practice Chalicity, the more I practice it personally over time, I became more self-reflective, and I felt like my opinions and cultural biases and learned knowledge, etc., I could kind of view it as an outsider and distance myself from it, which I thought was quite interesting. I mean, is this an indicator that you might be getting somewhere with Chalicity as a whole?
Yeah, I think that this is as a kind of indication that you're not a shaman. This is an indication that you're becoming an animist, Joe. Yeah. The animists see things in a much more raw way. There's some part of the miasma phrases like, say, what's it, nature raw in tooth and claw or something like that, like somehow there's something dreadful about the way that nature is. And when you become an animist, you start to see that things that you previously thought were dreadful, scary, unpleasant, actually, they're not that dreadful. They're okay, you know. And you do start to see yourself in context. But the only thing about that I would warn people against is it's important to not do too much analysis on it. We are here in an experiential subject. Analyzing it kills it. That's my view on it. There are people who've come before us who've done a lot. We talked about the I Ching. There are people who come before us who've done an awful lot of analysis on it, and fair enough.
And then you come along and you go, I'll cut all that out. We don't need any of that. Here's my book.
Yeah. But, you know, I'm not criticizing that stuff. You know, I'm not saying we need to get rid of that stuff. It's part of our lives, it's part of the color and richness of our lives. What I'm saying is that, like all esotericists, I feel that there's some value in having shamanistic technique as not as a substitute for all of that, but as an addition to it in a modern settled society. And I think that increasingly as our societies progress, people increasingly feel a need for something in their lives that isn't just, you know, that kind of logical planning. You know, I get up in the morning, I go to work, I plan out my day, I use my to-do list, I take for something that more than that out of life. And I can guarantee you shamanism, and never mind shamanism, animism will fill that hole.
Yeah, I mean, the pessimist in me says that that's what's going to destroy us all, you know.
Well,
thinking about things too much.
Yeah, but what I will tell you is when and if that happens, animists probably won't be worrying about it.
So somebody who is completely fresh, somebody who's completely fresh to shamanism, he's very interested in shamanism, but he or she has no knowledge of or practice in anything whatsoever. The very first thing they could do is start meditation. Start any non-imaginative form of meditation.
Okay, so I'd prefer to stick to the words that we're using. Mm-hmm. That word meditation, like all other words in settled societies, has a lot of baggage attached to it.
A tremendous amount. I agree.
To me, don't start meditation, start Chalicity.
Yeah.
If other people want to call what we're doing meditation, and I know that they do because there is some similarity, then fine. But meditation is not a word that I feel is useful to me. I would say that I'm practicing that back time stay style. I would say I'm practicing Chalicity with a focus. I may be focusing on BAT, for instance, the component that we've talked about so far. I may go out and practice other exercises for Chalicity that have a focus on Toshal Teen. And through my life, this is on a bigger time scale. All of my shamanistic practice will build my guchach. So what I'm saying is, if you set out to practice shamanism, if doing some form of what people call meditation helps you with that, then fine, but don't lose the focus on what it is we're doing here. Meditation is far from the be-all and end-all of shamanism. It's far from the be-all and end-all of animism.
Yeah, I said it's easy to leave the path, isn't it? It's easy to leave the path at any stage and get lost.
And this run brings us neatly onto another point about BAT. There's another, and this is one of the reasons why I call it paragality. Sometimes there is in our society, in our miasma, in our social conditioning, there is a built-in level of anxiety. It varies from person to person, but there's a built-in level of anxiety at whatever level about things like what other people think of us. Now think about what a shaman does. A shaman is a real oddball. Even in an animist community, a shaman is an odd person. There's somebody, they are, you know, to use the old analogy we use, a shaman is the mechanic in the community full of commuters who just want to get from A to B in their cars. Yeah. Mm. The commuter, the animist, if you like, takes their car into the garage, and the mechanic starts wanting to talk to them about engines and wheels and transmissions, tunnels, and all this kind of stuff. And the commuter, no, never mind that. Just get on with it. Sort it out for me. Yeah, weirdo. Yeah. and that's what a shaman's like in an animistic society. In true animistic society, shamans have a level of respect within society, but they're still outsiders. They're still, to a certain extent, they're oddballs. They're strange in that they're actually interested. Why be interested in what happens inside nature? Why, just enjoy it. That's an animist world for you, weirdo, So to be a shaman, you're going to go to you're going to go through the levels, the stages of training to become a shaman. You might as well start with bat right now, because one of the big components of bat, that it's not something you have to think or will yourself to do, but you have to develop the capability to not give a monkeys what people think of you. And that's very, very difficult in our society in every level. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a specific example of that. Here's what I'd like to think about, especially if you're English. Yeah. Say one day you meet the Queen, yeah? And instead of going, Your Majesty, and bowing, you go, hey, and give her a high five, or try to, This is what I'm talking about. You don't actually have to do that when you meet the Queen, because, you practice.
Or on a lesser level, it could be your boss at work. Instead of treating him as somebody who is above you, treat him as a friend. Him or her.
A pari-galti as an equal. And so one of the things you can practice for your bat is just, it's nothing about being rude, because people start to do this. That's a closed thing. Yeah. Mm. You close yourself off and you start being rude to people. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is being totally open to people, totally open to the other person, engage with them, engage with their spirit, embrace them, either physically or spiritually. And see what you can make out of any situation with them. You might find that it improves what happens in your workplace. But the key point is, whether it does or whether it doesn't is irrelevant. Shamanism is a set of techniques. The effectiveness of those techniques are things that ordinary people do not do, ordinary people do not understand. So therefore, you must be willing to be that person who does do that thing that ordinary people don't do, and is involved in that thing that ordinary people don't understand. And you must not care that other people, whatever they think about you, that's what you do. That's your focus. So you can see, in a certain sense, this is a back to Borag Shikotarate. It's that discipline. Remember, we said later on in the spirit journey that the discipline of the shaman is what makes that spirit journey useful. Well, here we are in Chalicity, right at stage one. This same far-sighted, open, steely discipline is here. There's a great definition of the word bat: far-sighted, open, steely discipline. But the key point is, you must not become closed in terms of bat.
Okay. So someone's living in the centre of London, and there's noises going off all over all the time. They're tremendously busy. They're involved in the daily grind in the middle of London, and they want to start practicing this. The option of going out into nature every day is not open to them. Is there anything they can do sat at home? Maybe they can, could they put headphones on and listen to sounds of nature and shut their eyes and practice this way? Anything like that? Anything at all that would help somebody?
In a city, there is always a place you can find where you can see a distance. You can see to a distance. Another great exercise for Chalicity is to be up high. You can practice the same thing, being up high, looking out over an expanse below you, a valley. Or, for instance, you're up on a mountain. This is the best. You're up on a mountain. You're looking out over the valley below, and you're practicing in the same way, with the same feeling that you would if you're on the edge of a sea or on the edge of the lake. But you can do this. I've done this from up in a tower block,
Yeah.
Or you can find even just some higher part of a town, maybe the high street that slopes downwards. You look out over the expanse below you. What you want to get is a place where you can see far. You could do that in a city, and it doesn't matter. It's not great that there are buildings and traffic and all that, but it doesn't matter. You can still do it. But what I would also say is that that feeling that you get. And you probably experienced it when you're in certain high places and you look out, and it's quite a good feeling. You look out from a high place over a low expanse below you, whether it's a city or whether it's anything. A lot of people just like to go up to see the view, right? In these really tall buildings, they like to go up to see the view. That's why we put observation decks in the tops of tall buildings. That same kind of feeling, you can stand with your the same way, your hands, your posture up. There's a great place to practice your back. You're standing with your hands open, your posture up. Other people on the observation deck, you better not care what they're thinking of you. Yeah. I don't mean that on the baseline. It's a half joke, but the bottom line is no concern for that kind of thing. Taking in that feeling. Now, here's the interesting thing. There are so you do this a few different places where you're looking out over this great valley. Take in the sense of what it's like in that place. This great sense. It's again, wonderful feeling. People like it. That's why we have observation decks. Feel that feeling. And now here's a clever thing you can do in a city. There are certain places in the Japanese tradition, one of the ancient Japanese traditions, these things were called a dogon. Dogon. Do means the earth and gon means the word or to speak, the place where the earth speaks. There are certain places that are not overlooking a view, that are not up in the mountains or up at the top of a tower block. There are certain places that give you that same feeling or give you something of that same feeling. What you can do is try to find some places that are like this. Obviously, you have to familiarize yourself with that feeling. You have to go to these places. You have to make the effort to go to these places so you can get the feeling. But then you can start searching for that feeling. And I've found places that have that same feeling that are quite enclosed, that are not necessarily huge, expansive. You have to search around a bit till you find something. That's a matter of degree, more or less. But in any given area, even sitting in your room at home, in any given area, there's going to be somewhere that feels more like that. It may not feel very much like that, but there's going to be somewhere that feels more like that than anywhere else in your room. So you can practice this there at the dogon, if you want to call it a dogon. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Is this related to geomancy at all?
Geomancy is a kind of branch of esotericism, not necessarily shamanism. But esotericism is the survival of shamanistic techniques in settled societies. Big subject. Lots of exotericism attached to that subject, but the simple answer to your question is yes, but.
Yeah.
And that's another podcast.
Okay, so this exercise in a nutshell for Bat, we are going to be stood or sat, looking over. A good place would be a lake. A good place would be the sea. If you're in a city, somewhere where you're looking far, and try and shut down your thoughts and allow nature in. Allow your environment in.
Open your posture. It helps. It's not essential, but what I mean by opening your posture is try and hold your arms outwards, your palms up. Mm-hmm. Don't stand with your feet tight together. Open up, you know what I mean? As if you're going to embrace somebody. You're somebody that you really like. You're going to embrace somebody. Instead of embracing that person, you embrace nature, or you embrace the expanse, the weave, the tapestry of the world that's out there in front of you. You embrace it.
Is it good to, when we're first starting out, is it good to focus on the breath as a method of shutting down the thoughts? Yeah,
that can be useful. You just count your breaths, or alternatively, breathe to a count. You can breathe to a slow count of 5. Mm-hmm. Slow breathing in and out. If you want to go into all that stuff, breathe from your diaphragm rather than your rib cage. But really, that stuff is for what people call meditation or martial arts or whatever. In shamanism, we want the breathing to be pretty natural. So, thinking about all that stuff, it kills the state. So don't think, if you can do it without thinking about it too much, then fine. If for instance, if you've got martial arts training, then you'll be able to do that without thinking about it. If you can't, then much more important is the openness. You want to be open to what's there. That's the most important thing.
Well, too many people practicing meditation in the traditional sense end up shutting themselves off, don't they, rather than opening themselves up.
Well, do you remember the Fan Quan's painting? The fork, the fushi, the fork that goes off to the right and then falls down onto the roof of a Buddhist temple.
Yes.
There are traditions within meditation that seek isolation. Some groups, for instance, some try to get people to break off their links with friends and family and this type of stuff. That is the opposite of. That is the exact opposite of shamanism, the exact opposite of what we're talking about. Here's something to think about. When you become a shaman or an animist, even, we are successful because we are collaborative we're collaborative animals. We have become successful because of our ability at collaboration. We can also make tools, which is a pretty useful thing to be able to do when you're a collaborative animal. But in general, we tend to embrace spiritually people who are very close to us, who are on our team, if you like, who are members of our tribe, members of our hunting party. But think of like this, and maybe if you've been member of a group, maybe a biker group, or maybe a football team or a rugby team, or maybe a team in the workplace who's done some really good work, and you feel good about the people you were working with because you got this amazing thing done, this amazing project done. You all seem to gel well. That great feeling that you get when you are in that state and you feel something special for those particular people. You feel an openness to them, a kind of spiritual embrace. Becoming an animist or becoming a shaman, you need to extend that idea. You need to extend that idea outwards, beyond even people. You need to extend this idea to the trees, to the mountains, to the rivers, to the streams, and have the same feeling about those and other people and animals and nature. You need to have the same feeling that you have in your little group about those other people. But again, not in a wishy-washy way. Chalicity, because of Bat, is not a wishy-washy thing. It's not nebulous. It's not, hey man, I'm just going to chill out and it's not like that. Remember, Bureg Shikhurt Harate, the eyes of the eagle. That's the strength of it. One of the things I'm going to say, Joe, because the length of this podcast is getting on, and the next subject that we want to get onto is Toshalteen. I can probably talk for longer about Toshalteen than I can about Bat. So I'm wondering if we should call this...
Let's do it, man. Let's do it next episode. Yeah.
Introduction to Chalicity Part 1, Bat.
Yep, definitely. So, well, to make it very clear then, when we are talking, we've talked about Bat specifically, but it's incorrect to say, I'm working on my Bat, therefore that's it. It's all part of the whole, isn't it? It's all part of working on your Chalicity. Correct. If you work on Bat, you are also working on your Chalicity. And it's almost like, I remember you describing this to me once, you're putting a good coin, it's like you're putting your coin into your piggy bank of Chalicity, so to speak. When every time you practice any of these components.
So let's extend that idea. So you've got this piggy bank, right? There's a slot on the top and you keep putting coins in the top. Yeah. But because we live in a settled society, the rubber bung at the bottom of the piggy bank, it's open, right? They keep dropping out the bottom. This is why you can never work too much on your Chalicity.
All right, cool. So we've got a really good solid exercise for somebody to do there. In fact, we've got several. We've got something if they're in nature and something if they're in the city. I think that's a really good exercise to do. I'm going to go and do that myself, even though I've been doing very similar things. So I hope you've enjoyed that episode. If you're interested in a course on this subject, which goes deep into the practices and helps you through this process step by step, then do hit me up on email at joe@wovenenergy.com. That's joe@wovenenergy.com. Or you can get me on social media, the Woven Energy Facebook page, message me there. I'm quite approachable and nice, so get in touch and let me know what you would want in that course. Any questions you have after listening to this episode and probably the next few, let me have them and I'll field them to Damon or include them in an online course. So just get in touch and let me know. Awesome. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll both see you in episode 8, where we will talk about the Neoteny. We're going to, well, the English name's Neoteny. What's it in Mongol again? Toshfulteen. Fantastic. See you then.